Here.
Hi, everybody. This is Sarah Wolf. I'm with Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm here with my MNIPL team, including Sam Blackwell. And I'm also here with Jenna Warmuth from Rewiring America. She's the Senior Manager of Midwest Regional Policy there. We're really glad to have all of you joining us for this really important topic today. Um, so I'm just gonna get a Sam, is everything you let me know if anything's off, and we'll just dive right in. This particular webinar is part of a fall webinar series that we've been doing over the last few weeks, devoted to what is driving my energy costs up. It's really examining how the retreat from clean energy is costing us all more, and then what we can do about it. And so we started off thinking about the expiring tax incentives for clean energy. We'll share those resources again. The second one was on how utilities plan for profit through the infrastructure that they build. And the third one is today, and it's about data centers. It's what when a data center comes to town, what are Minnesota communities gaining or losing? This webinar is really in two parts or aspects. And the first is a really quick review of some of the issues facing states and communities in which tech companies are seeking to build hyperscale data centers. So data centers have been with us for decades. Servers situated in buildings to keep data accessible for a company's business operations. What is different now, even in the last couple of years, is the explosion of hyperscale data centers coming at us from all of the tech players, Meta, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, xAI, as they compete to build out capacity to power their own version of AI and aim to dominate the market. There are new headlines every day about deals being made between chip companies and AI tech companies, about the speculative nature of this AI future, about the possibility of a bubble. Will the future these tech giants are hoping for materialize? And none of them exactly know, but what they do know is they can't risk being left out. So they are all running full steam ahead, spending unbelievable sums to secure their spot, hoping that if the song ends, they are still standing. And in the meantime, their wake ripples through our communities. So the first part of this webinar is a look at some of the impacts of hyperscale data centers on communities. And I'll tell you, many of these issues deserve their own webinars. They have their own webinars. We'll direct you to those webinars. But this is a taste, and we will offer you up those follow-up resources so that communities that have so far been left out of conversations about whether they want these hyperscale data centers have an idea about what to look out for. And the second part of this webinar is designed to ask the question, if a community does want a data center, or if they are coming anyway, can we do it better? And that's where I'm so glad to have Jenna Warmuth from Rewiring America here to help describe a shift in how we should understand the electrical grid and the role our homes and businesses and buildings play in that system. So I'm going to get started by using as an example one of the data centers being proposed down in Dakota County, down over up in Dakota County, and in Castle Rock Township and the city of Farmington. And this slide, I want to thank the Coalition for Responsible Data Center Development, which is the community that is organizing around responding to this data center proposal. They have this on their website. And this, if you're looking at this image, what you see is basically what has been a golf course in the middle, surrounded by residential homes that are highlighted on the sides. And that golf course is situated in the picture, if you go down, you see a river, the stream. It's a trout stream that goes through there. So this is a proposal for a data center by Tract, which is a developer that goes around and develops proposals. This next picture is showing how the data center buildings would line up across what has been this golf course in this residential community. And you can see there are gray boxes that represent those buildings, 12 buildings ranging from 50 to 80 feet tall. It's 2.53 million total square feet. This setup would require about 708 megawatts of energy. Now, I had the chance to go to Virginia on a data center tour. Virginia is home of the highest concentration of data centers in the world. And it was an opportunity to see up close how data centers are positioning themselves in communities. And so just have a couple of photos from this to kind of share with you what this seems like. When you're talking about data centers that are 50 to 80 feet tall, this gives you a sense of some of the scale of that. And what's interesting to see is how they are in the community. So this is a set of ball fields that had been built after a residential development was put up. And you can see that it's right on the edge of the property. Here, the baseball field is right next to the building. And you can imagine that if instead of being a ball field, you are a neighbor across the street from the proposed development in Farmington, that data center will be in your visual space a good share of the time. Which is why siting and setbacks are so important in the discussion. And in Minnesota, we don't have any state guidelines about setbacks, and communities are pursuing developments without shared understandings with the community about where the buildings will be positioned. And so in this particular one, you can see just here some, here it is. And if you were to just go flip around to the other side, you would see homes that are right on the opposite side of this ball field. So it's important to note that these data centers bring several things into a neighborhood in addition to their size, and that includes continuous light, continuous noise, and sometimes air pollution. Here is a photo that is from the More Perfect Union video, I live 400 yards from Mark Zuckerberg's massive data center, which is highlighting a community in Georgia. And you can see from the pictures here, this is from inside their home and they're looking outside. This is what it looks like. Their home is lit up continually. And I mentioned that there is sometimes air pollution, and that is from diesel generators that are lining the data centers. So if this is a shot from that tour in Virginia, and I'm standing on a bike trail right now when I'm taking this photo, and you can see that the little striped boxes positioned there are diesel generators. There are hundreds and thousands of them depending on the size of the hyperscale data center. And in addition to the pollution, then there is a noise element. And different data centers have different noise levels, but it is constant. And inside the data centers, the noise from the servers is enough to cause hearing loss in some cases for those inside. But the real concern is for those living or recreating outside the data center. And this kind of information is critical for communities we're not typically getting it. Those communities aren't getting it so they can inform their decisions. Again, variables like setbacks matter a great deal. Then there are water implications. This is another area where a data center can be very extractive to a community. And the quantity of water needed can be as much or more as the local population already uses. Particularly when this is being extracted from our aquifers, our groundwater resources, these high water needs can impact water quantity levels, creating low water pressure, sediment in the water. And these are some of the issues highlighted in this More Perfect Union piece, which this is another screenshot from that. We'll be sending that resource along. I just want to point out the south branch of the Vermilion River in this Farmington Castle Rig Township proposal that is along the side of that data center proposal. So zooming in on that tract plan, you can see the buildings are encroaching on the south branch of the Vermilion River, that rare trout stream. And so it's a good question for us. What does the removal of habitat from the area in favor of cement do? Will there be wastewater that impacts the river? There are many questions that come from the water piece. So when we think about ways that data centers come into communities and what they extract, we're thinking about land, water, jobs to AI, goodwill, health, revenue, and energy. And those next two, I'm just going to spend one moment on each of those before we kind of shift to the next part of our webinar here. But because today's topic is focused on on energy, I'm going to talk about these last two here, revenue and energy. And I want to mention that there is a coalition of organizations who've been working together to look at these issues, each of them, and develop policy recommendations. And we'll be communicating more with you about those too. First of all, I want to just mention what we know about the revenue situation. Now, a note here, because what we are hearing from local, in 2011, Minnesota passed legislation that gave tax exemptions to data centers. Now, in 2011, data centers were much smaller than they are being proposed to be right now. But there was no sales tax on electricity, no sales tax on hardware, no sales tax on software. What we saw this past legislative session in 2025 was a move to extend those tax breaks much further into the future. There were at times proposals to take it beyond 2100. What we ended up with was extending the tax breaks to 2077. Now, a note here, because much of what we are hearing from local government entities that are entertaining data center proposals and making commitments for water and electricity and land is that these government entities believe data centers are a boon to their community, despite the state losing out on sales tax revenue, because they will receive property tax revenue for the community. And so I just want to point out something we've learned, that communities really need to look closely at this component too, because most often data center developers end up seeking property tax abatements in some form or another as they go. They may decide they want to skip the property tax and just make contributions to other elements in the community, but it's an important piece to be aware of. So what is this subsidy program costing us in missed revenue? For the state of Minnesota in 2025, before any hyperscalers have come online, it's $114 million. I want to do a shout out to Good Jobs First, an organization that has compiled information on these subsidies and what they're costing states. So now I'm going to kind of hone in on the energy piece. And what we know is that these data centers require huge amounts of energy. As we mentioned, the Castle Rock Township project, 708 megawatts. I want to point out that that is more than the Monticello nuclear generating plant for one of these projects. Now, this need for electricity has the potential to impact the community in a number of ways. One, it has the potential to increase electricity rates. So many places around the country are seeing really escalating electricity rates because of data centers. But Minnesota last year, as part of the data center legislation that was passed, directed the Public Utilities Commission to develop a system of, they call it a tariff, but a system to ensure that ratepayers are not left to pay costs associated with the data center needs. So thank you to the author, Representative Patty Acom, for work to develop this component of the legislation and so many others. Will this work adequately? We hope so. We'll see what the PUC does, and this is an effort just to have us, I'll be on the lookout for how this is going to turn out for everyone. But there is another huge problem with an increase in electricity demand in the moment we're in, when our electricity is coming from multiple sources, not all of them clean. And that is an increase in greenhouse gas emissions. This is from November 4th, just a couple of days ago. And basically, it's really saying that where we are right now in terms of greenhouse gas emissions means that we need to be reducing. We need to be reducing immediately. And we've known this for years. But scientists have been saying this, and the longer we delay, the steeper our path to of reducing those emissions needs to be. We need to be on a downward trajectory. And I will just say that that means that we can't be in a position where data centers are driving up emissions for some number of years before they arrive at clean energy. So I've got two pieces, proposals to pitch to you. The first is that we need to be looking at data centers not taking huge swaths of undeveloped land to build their seas of windowless buildings. Instead, we need to be asking them to build in better places, build perhaps where there is blight, and make it better. So if you can imagine those spaces that you drive by that are parking lots but vacant buildings, those are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about. Moving from land that is not being well used to land that is better used and mitigated. The second thing we need to do is we need to ensure that data centers are working with a clean energy imperative. And for this, we offer you Beyonce. Bring your own new clean energy. This has to be the new baseline. Not let's build natural gas plants to service increased need from data centers and then switch over to nuclear in 15 years. Not let's keep this coal plant open longer. It should be, if you are going to operate a data center in Minnesota, you will create, enable, pay for, sponsor, build new clean energy to run it. And one part of this is also understanding how we can find capacity within our existing systems, within our grid, within our homes, to find efficiencies that will help us all make better use of the clean energy that we have available to us, that we are going to be creating and using, and doing that the best way possible. So with this, I think this is a good time for me to turn it over to the next part of this webinar, which is we've looked at some of the issues data centers bring to communities. We've looked at those ways of operating that are principally extractive. And then we need to think about if a data center decides, if a community decides that a data center is is something they want to pursue, is there a way to do it better? Jenna Warmuth.
Yes, I
Thank
will.
you so much.
Yeah, I will start sharing my screen. Do you see my slides? We good? Awesome. All right. So as Sarah said, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate your time and attention today. As Sarah said, I'm Jenna Warmuth. I am the Senior Manager for Midwest Regional Policy at Rewiring America. I have 3 priority states at the moment, and that is Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I myself live in northern Minnesota. I live in Hermantown, so this is an issue that's very pressing for me personally as well. If anyone has been following where these data centers are going online, we are having that conversation in my community currently. Here at Rewiring America, we're extremely focused on making our households the center of this clean and resilient energy future. And that is part of the reason why over last spring and the summer, we created this idea and report that ended up in this Homegrown Energy report that was released in September. A little preface before I really dig into it is that this isn't an endorsement for siting data centers wherever and whenever. We understand that every community has unique priorities, histories, economic realities, and those are the things that should guide the decisions about data center development. This report also doesn't cover the very real concerns of water use, noise, and etc. What we did is present a creative idea that really addresses the part of the equation that we have the most expertise in, and that is ensuring household energy affordability and expanding electrification across the country. So this is a piece of the larger puzzle of solutions that addresses community protection and centers affordability for households at a time when I think we all know folks are really struggling with bills of all types, and energy bills are one of them. This presentation is a mix of national and Minnesota specific analysis. So some of the numbers you'll see, I'll try to point out are a very national scoped look, and then I will dig down a little bit into some Minnesota specific numbers. The country is in a phase of energy demand growth that we haven't seen in a very long time. And a lot of this is driven by data center speculation. Estimations are that there's a projected 128 gigawatts of new demand over the next 5 years. 3/4 of that is from data centers. So while this is transforming the economy, it's also reshaping what we need from our electric grid. And families are the ones where the near-term impacts will fall. It will fall on our families and communities. And so we really felt like we needed to talk about what the solution is specifically for those households in our communities. Um, when you look at this map, you'll see that almost every major utility territory in the United States is facing multiple very large load interconnection requests and inquiries. In a lot of places, this prospective load would strain regional grids, and traditional thinking concludes that would require expensive transmission upgrades and new generation, including fossil fuel. However, these loads are coming on really fast. I think that's part of what we're grappling with, right? These are just coming on at such a pace that new generation resources such as gas peakers, nuclear, are very slow to come online. They're expensive to build, and they do not meet clean energy goals and mandates many states have committed to. So instead of pouring billions of dollars into these upgrades and this new generation that will not meet the moment right now that we're in, we need to look for resources and solutions that exist today. And one of those resources and solutions are our households and the infrastructure we already have here. That's why we are trying to reframe this entire conversation. Instead of thinking about homes as passive consumers that are just absorbing costs and absorbing whatever our local utility gives us, with little control, we should treat our households as the distributed energy assets they are, and that they can provide clean and affordable energy for not only themselves, but the community at large and businesses such as hyperscalers that are coming online. Millions of small upgrades in efficiency, electrification, solar and storage add up to massive grid capacity relief. And you'll see that as we go forward here. Unlike most grid investments, these projects are quick to deploy, they directly lower household bills, and they increase clean energy generation. So that feels like a win-win-win. Throughout the report, we outline how much of this demand can be met by household upgrades and what that means for our household affordability in the grid. So we'll go through some different scenarios and how much we think maybe hyperscalers could invest in and what that would mean for households. When we talk about the opportunity for freeing up capacity with just heat pumps specifically, we'll get into the solar and storage piece as well. Hyperscalers can meet 33% of their capacity needs by paying for heat pumps in 21 million single family homes that are ripe for those heat pumps and that are in the household economics for those households today. So just think about that. Like they could, that, how long does it take to switch a furnace to a heat pump and the efficiencies and capacity that could be made? It's pretty amazing. Well, electric resistance, I should say electric resistance households, not gas furnaces. So, but still, switch electric resistance to a heat pump and you immediately free up 33% of the capacity needed. On this slide, the black circles are the capacity that data centers need that is projected through 2029. So this isn't all data centers that will ever come online. This is what was in the queue and proposed when we did this report through 2029. And then the different colored circles within that are the different upgrades that could meet some of that capacity. So you'll see the teal is switching central AC to heat pumps where the economics are favorable. The red is switching electric resistant space heating to heat pumps. And the purple is switching traditional water heaters to heat pump water heaters where the economics are favorable. In Minnesota, one of the highest effective strategies is transitioning those currently dependent on electric resistance heating to more efficient energy and bill saving heat pumps. This not only frees up needed capacity on our system because they are much more efficient than that traditional electric resistance heating. It saves customers on average $1,900 a year on bills. That is not a small amount of money, and that can go towards a lot of things in a household, such as medications or food or other things that families really need. So part of this story is that the measures and upgrades matter depending on where you're at in the economics of the household. What works in one state or location will not be the same as others. So when we perform this analysis by state, we wanted to understand where there's cost savings for households today, as well as that capacity freed up for these large scale users. When we zoom out nationally, we find that investing in these upgrades frees up a lot, the capacity that is equivalent to things like a gas power plant, and the costs are similar. So it's in the money, it's quicker to deploy, it saves households money, and it's not any more expensive than trying to build a gas peaker plant. Some of the benefits just generally to the household when we make the heat pump upgrades specifically is that, like I said, lower annual energy bills. It's $740 nationally, but Minnesota, because of our cold climate, households stand to save far more than that. We reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 29 million metric tons. It's equivalent of taking 6 million cars off the road. And it would provide $2.3 billion in additional health benefits through reduced outdoor pollution. Now let's talk about solar and storage and how that measures up for this capacity need. You can see rooftop solar and storage is an essential part of this solution. In many areas of the country, it more than frees up the capacity needed for these large energy users. And for Minnesota, if we upgrade all eligible households, now that doesn't mean every single household in the state, those are eligible households that today, don't need all of the infrastructure upgrades, are in the right orientation to capture, right? Solar, it's not renters, it is single family households. So with upgrading those households, we can meet all of the expected data center demand through 2030 just by upgrading those households. And this also provides cost containment and affordability measures directly to those households. When they get, the solar and storage package at a much reduced price and then are immediately saving on their energy bills, that prospect is just so positive for a household and then also positive for our grid. We're not building more power plants. We're not expending a ton of transmission infrastructure costs out there. It just is a really interesting and positive narrative for our households. So some highlights, and then I'll get into a little bit more about Minnesota. Capturing these investments sets us up for a faster transition to our modern all-electric future. It's not just, meeting the needs of these hyperscalers, but also doing the things that I think a lot of us believe should be happening anyway. And it accelerates that transition for us to that future that we want to see. The solar and storage provides cheap electricity to households. And when households save money, when they upgrade to electric appliances, that just ensures, a better future for all of us. It also provides resiliency, right? When you have solar plus battery storage backup, when the power goes out, those homes have resiliency. And so that, you think about the power goes out, people lose food in their fridge, they lose medications that need to be refrigerated, people have medical equipment that is essential. When we add solar and storage, those concerns are much less for households. So it's not even just, monetary relief. It's stress off of a household generally when they don't have to worry about those kinds of things happening. And it grows the market. I mean, it creates jobs in communities, right? We're thinking about how we're installing these heat pumps, we're installing solar and storage. That is good local economics, that's good jobs for people, and we're driving down costs for all households. So it just is very all around a very positive benefit to communities. The bottom line for Minnesota is that Minnesota is expecting roughly 1.5 gigawatts of total demand from data centers by our calculations by 2030. And by upgrading approximately 125,000 households in the state that currently use inefficient electric resistance heating to heat pumps, along with rooftop and solar storage upgrades to those households that are eligible, we can unlock over 1.6 gigawatts of grid capacity. So that's over 100% of the projected 2030 data center demand. I mean, it feels like, why not, right? We can do that quicker. We don't have to put up transmission upgrades on the system. We don't have to build new generation. These are solutions that are in our communities today that are viable and that will help communities be more resilient and help cost containment. Top line benefits for the report overall, some takeaways just to think about is cost-effective capacity. Hyperscalers, data centers, securing grid capacity at cost, similar to building new gas power plants. Household savings. Families benefit from substantial reductions in energy bills through these upgrades. the environmental impact, which is significantly decreases carbon emissions and improves air quality, and grid resilience. It creates a more flexible and resilient energy grid for everyone. Yeah, so I think I'm going to stop there, and I appreciate you all so much for listening and hearing our proposition, and I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Um, Great presentation, great report. I've really loved this report, the podcast that I heard on volts, and your presentation illuminating how we can be smarter about meeting energy demand from wherever it's coming. But particularly in this moment when we're facing a new data center era where they're seeking so much power and being smarter about that. I think we've seen a couple different sets of questions coming through the chat. And so thank you. Please keep putting your questions in the chat. I'll try to get them. Some of them have to do with what Jen is presenting right now. Some of them have to do with the data center phenomenon as project proposals are coming forward. And so, so we'll go back and forth between those. One thing that I didn't talk about, which has been brought up in the chat, thankfully, I was making sure I wasn't going to go on too long, was the way non-disclosure agreements have been used by data center project proposers to leave communities in the dark, so they're not sure what's happening, where local officials sign these agreements and agree to not say various things about what's happening with the proposal. And the problem that is for the communities that have questions about any of the issues or more that we've brought up, but they're not able to find out what's going on. And Jenna, you mentioned that you're from Hermantown, and we know in the very recent weeks we've seen local government action around that issue stemming from, oh, this is a zoning change that we're looking for some light industrial. When communities have real questions about what is the appropriate zoning for something that has so many diesel generators and looks like this and sounds like this, etc. So thank you to those of you who've been adding that to the chat. It's a real issue. One of the resources I'm going to send is the Minnesota Environmental Quality Board had a meeting a couple of weeks ago looking at some issues around data centers, and some people in communities provided really compelling testimony about what that's like to not really have good answers about what's going on surrounding project development. So that'll be in the resource list we send out too. One of the questions was a question that has been answered in the chat too, but want to throw it out to you. It was just like, how, when we're looking at Minnesota and how many homes are running on electric resistance heat right now? I think some resources were added to the chat, and someone said it's around 20%. And Jenna, just wanted to throw that to you.
In our analysis, I believe I said it, but I will go back to look. We found that homes that run on electric resistance heat, and that it is economic to switch to a heat pump today, is about 125,000 households in Minnesota. That's what we had in our analysis. Now, this is not utility level data, right? And so there may be some flexibility in there, but it's a pretty good data point.
Great, that's a lot. Feels like a lot. And do those homes typically have a higher electric bill than other homes, or maybe that's just too nuanced to be able to answer generally?
I mean, obviously, right, the efficiency of the household and size, but yes, I would say on average, those households using electric resistance heating do have much higher electricity bills than others.
Another set of questions have been around what is there a legal mechanism to do what we're talking about here in the Homegrown Energy report? Are we looking at a utility program? Are we looking at legislation that we need to pass? Thoughts on that?
Yes, I believe there are many paths, right? Like, as I said, this is kind of a very fast approaching problem, right? I think for all of us, it's come at a pace that many didn't expect. But when we've looked around the country at either things that have been implemented or ideas that are coming out, a lot of utilities are asking for tariffs that are specific to these entities. And there's a lot of room for intervention within those tariffs to kind of get in some asks, like you put so much money towards a pot for the community that you're serving. So, whether it's for weatherization or these electrification upgrades, I think that can be worked in. Like you said, Minnesota passed their bill last year that requires them to put some funds towards the weatherization assistance program, which is really great. There's more localized things that you can do, like a community benefits agreement where the community says, okay, if you're going to come in, you need to do XYZ, and that could include putting money towards household upgrades or other things that the community deems are important. There's lots of different levers. There's, resource plans that we can talk about getting into for utilities. So I think there are a lot of different levers to pull. It's going to look a little different in every state, just because of current laws on the books and how the utilities operate. But I do believe there's a lot of leverage. And when we're talking about communities, I saw there was a question as to like, why would a hyperscaler do this? Like, why would they put money towards this? I think we've seen that communities aren't just accepting these these entities coming in and saying, okay, that's fine. I think these entities are very concerned with ensuring that they don't have backlash. And so that is something for a community to leverage, is that need for that entity to have that community buy-in. And that's where that community benefits agreement could come in too.
Great. And I'm going to ask Alex and Benjamin and Brett, some of our colleagues who have been following the chat along with us, if there are other questions that we need to ask Jenna now.
I did see one. I did see a couple related specifically to solar, if I could just address those.
Please, yeah.
One is that, would solar alone be effective? And in our analysis, no, because we're talking about reducing what is called peak capacity on our grid. And when we're talking about reducing that peak capacity, that means we kind of got to shift when energy is used. And that means having a battery to store energy so that households can do some of that shifting. So while solar is, I think, great just for affordability for a household and, getting off of some of the utility rate structures, it's not necessarily going to do what we need it to do in meeting that peak capacity. And then there was a question about community solar. We are we're focusing on the household in this report and smaller systems. I would say absolutely there is a role to play for community solar. We're kind of talking about that internally ourselves. And so this is a kind of a package deal, right? Like this isn't the one or two things you can do. I think it's a package of solutions depending on your community and your utility rate structures and other things that are going on in your locale.
Fantastic. Other questions?
Good conversation coming up about the legislative session, and looking at the large load tariffs again. So I don't know if there's anything you want to riff on there, Jenna, about the opportunity there. Awesome.
I might throw that to Sarah to talk about opportunities, actually.
Sure. Um, so as we referenced, there was a data center bill that was passed last year, and it was a standalone bill that was at the very last day during that special session. And it ended up combining things that had been moving in different ways. So it became kind of like this package, and some of the things that um, ally legislators who were working on this were trying to advance were better protections for communities when it comes to um, uh, and I think a lot of us acknowledged, including bill authors and supporters, that there is more to do when it comes to protecting communities. For sure, that bill didn't take us where we needed to go in terms of community protections. It also did an extension of tax exemptions. The tax exemptions designed to make Minnesota an attractive place to come to put the data centers. So that was part of what was passed last year as well. These things can change, and they can be, and I think people are thinking about what do we really want here? It might have been in 2011 that tax exemptions made sense when they were so much smaller. Now, when we are looking at the very richest people who have ever existed on the planet, coming and asking us for tax exemptions for their data centers, does that change things? And I think that's a really important conversation that people have been having. Alex, you were talking about one component there, which is the tariffs, which affects like the rate structures for our electricity use, and that's going to be proceeding in front of the Public Utilities Commission. And so we're going to be kind of watching how that plays out. And this is just to acknowledge that all of these elements that go into what make up our electricity rates are complex. There are lots of variables, different things. But that's why we've been trying to talk about what are the pieces that can contribute to rising electricity costs so that we can be clear-eyed about what they are. Is it an additional need for infrastructure? Is that additional need for infrastructure driven by data centers, or is it driven by something else? There's an opportunity to do more work on data center legislation this year and beyond. People who follow the legislature know that it's very close, a close divide between who's in control in the House and the Senate. But one thing we're finding is that all kinds of people on all parts of the political spectrum have thoughts about data centers and whether they want them in their communities and whether we should be giving them tax breaks or not, or whether all of these issues. So we're definitely putting together in a collection of groups and who've been working on this a proactive legislative agenda that we hope will be discussed as the session goes on. I'm not probably answering your question exactly, Alex, but here's what I'm hoping that anyone who's still on this webinar will do if they have an opinion or if they have a thought about data centers and their place in the Minnesota landscape in your community or elsewhere. We're going to send you some follow-up resources in the next day, and it's going to have a bunch of links. But the main takeaway is I hope you will use your voice by telling your legislator what you're thinking. Call your state representative, email them, your state senator, also the governor, and let these people know that what you think about tax breaks for Microsoft and Amazon and Google. Let them know what you think about non-disclosure agreements that communities are signing that local government entities are signing, and that is an inappropriate thing for communities that are going to face so many new issues if a data center comes to their community. And let them know what you think about data centers and their energy use. So you can pick from a menu of options, but these are the things that we would love you to tomorrow even. You don't need to have the fact sheet with all the answers and know exactly what it's looking like. The main thing to communicate is the way it's being done now. If you don't feel that that is satisfactory, please call and let them know what your concerns are. Please call and let them know that this is something that we need to fix and that we need to do better. We'll have resources for that tomorrow, but you could do that even without that today. And we'll also send you links to the Homegrown Energy report. And this is a fabulous thing for you to send to your legislator, to your local reporter in the newspaper. It's a great report. It does not take tons of time to read. It's very accessible. You've done a great job. So sharing that kind of thing with your community of policymakers and legislators is a great next step. All right. Well, Alex or Ben or Brett, have you found any other questions as I've been going on? Really so appreciative of all of the comments that have come in the chat. We're going to have a really robust set of resources coming your way soon. So thank you for joining us today. Jenna, thank you. Thank you to you, to Rewiring America, for expanding our minds about what's possible here, and for giving us real tools and real data to take forward, so we have a little more muscle in our argument. All right.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. I appreciate your time.